Thank you everyone for attending today. Today's event is on Dynamics GP AP workflow, and on the line today is Brittany Preponitzky, who is going to talk about a variety of things that you can do now on your own, as well as with assistance. At the very basis, at least map out your business processes, approval processes, and how you would want to automate your approvals. And that will save you time and effort. Brittany, over to you to continue with your own introduction, and then I will give you control.
Perfect. So, hi guys, my name is Brittany. I'm sure most of you may have been in contact with me at some point or another. I am the support manager here at Endeavour. I think I've been with Endeavour 6 years now. All right, so I'm sure everyone knows, but this is GP. So we're actually going to do, I'm going to show you first what AP workflow can do for you, and then I'm going to show you actually how you can build your own basic AP workflow. Workflow is one of those things, it's a little bit of a blank canvas when you get started with it. You can kind of do almost anything you want, which is good and bad. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword. It's kind of like going to a restaurant and having too many options. I like if you only gave me 3 options. However, it does allow us to adapt to all those business processes that you may have inside your business. Okay, I will tell you the hardest part about setting up workflow typically tends to be is getting all those processes out of everyone's brain and says, okay, when we have this invoice, it goes to Steve because of this. And mapping out all those rules typically is you got to do that brain dump, and sometimes is a lot, because there's a lot in some of our brains. So let's actually hop into what a workflow can do for you. I set up a really typical workflow where I said anything less than $10,000, I have to, the Brittany manager has to approve it. Anything over $10,000, Rob manager has to approve it. So what would happen is we would put in an entry for our invoice. Okay, we put it into the batch. I'm sure this is not a new window for any of us, but I like to show it off because it seems like so much fun. Once I put this invoice in for $15,000, okay, and I go ahead and submit it, I can submit it in with a comment saying, please approve for me. It's a rush. This now cannot be posted until my approver actually approves this invoice. So this can actually happen one of 2 ways inside of GP that you can approve it, or actually one of 3, sorry, don't let me lie to you. You can come back into the transaction entry window. You can view the history, see that it actually is my boss Rob who needs to approve it because it's over $15,000, or it's over $10,000, sorry, because it's 15. And they can go ahead and approve it right from this window. Okay, then or they can reject or delegate it. They can delegate it to another user. Or, obviously, we probably have more than one invoice going in through a day. We can actually come into our smart list, or our navigation list, sorry, and we can actually see those transactions that are requiring approval. And we can check them all off at once. We can see them all together, and we can check them all off at once if you have a user who is approving that is inside of GP. Now, you might say to me, that's great, Brittany. I have users that some approve inside of GP, and I have some users that are maybe some department managers, or maybe they manage a part of a budget and they're not inside of GP, and we don't actively want to bring them to GP. It's just a lot. So as you can see here, I could select all my invoices that are pending approval. You can see that it's both Rob that has to approve it. You will notice that it's the Active Directory name. Okay, so it's not my GP name. You'll notice that I'm in here. It's actually my Active Directory name. Now, it's all beautiful that it's inside of GP. What happens if you have a user that needs an approval that's outside of GP? You can actually install what we call web services. Most people were grandfathered and got web services with Core GP. And what web services allows you to do is that when I hit submit, and I'm actually going to show you it will actually send out an email out to the person it needs to have an approval from, and it will send it out to the user who it needs to have an approval from and allow them to approve, reject, or delegate from inside of their email. There's one caveat to this though. However, that email needs to actually be to someone inside of your organization. So in my case, it actually has to be from someone at endeavorsolutions.ca. Now, if you are at company A, it obviously has to be at companyaa.com or .ca or whatever your case may be. But you can have users approve or reject or delegate these purchase orders or payables transactions from inside their email. You can also add additional information inside of here, and you can set that up as to see how much information they get or how much information they don't get. This will allow you to have department managers not have to access GP and maybe max out your GP seats, or maybe just not have people who are approving have to go through that new process of learning GP, and it's another software, and they have to log in and kind of all that rigmarole, right? For those of us who live and die inside of GP, we may not want to use the email functionality, and that's totally fine as well. Now, you might say, that's great, I get an email, but my auditors want to know who approved this, or maybe not even my auditors, I want to know who approved it. That's not a problem. I'm going to go ahead and approve these because I'm actually logged in as the administrator to GP, so I have more powers than Rob. Just don't tell him that in real life. Just inside of this GP world. What happens is we can actually view all of that historical information as to who approved it, when they approved it, from both the entry screen and the inquiry screen. So I'm just going to pull up an invoice that I had from previous here. And if you see here, this is my inquiry Zoom. I can actually view the history. I can see that originally I was the one who submitted it, okay? And the system was the one who actually approved it and said that it didn't require any approval, okay? And of course, you can see all of them I might have here, okay? So you can see that this one was $50,000. You know, I needed a final approval, and it was myself, and it was 10K or over, okay? Now, you can have more than 2 rules. You can have 5 rules, however many rules you need to have in there. You might say, this is great. How do I set this up or maybe test this out in my own environment? I just want to build a basic one to see what happens. So we're going to actually hop into how do you create your own AP workflow. I'm going to give you a little secret of once you build one workflow, it's kind of like riding a bike. Once you figure one out, the rest of them are pretty easy. Okay, so it actually hides underneath our administration window under setup, and it's under company actually, and it's a little bit of a scroll. So if you didn't see it in the first part, keep scrolling, you'll get there. A little bit of a one there. Okay, so you'll actually get into this workflow maintenance. You will see when you come in here, you have more options than just purchasing. Now, workflow did come out in GP 2013 R2. It does not have all the same options as GP 2018. I'm actually in GP 2018 R1. So you'll notice I have a few more options inside of here. You'll notice I have financial, sales, purchasing, payroll, project, administration, and so on. Okay. You'll find things like workflow for security inside of administration. Sales is for things like RM batches. The financial series is for ones like journal entry batches, stuff like that. Okay. So I'm actually going to hop in our payables one and show you how you can build a simple one by yourself. Now, of course, if you want our assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for you anytime. But if you want to play around with one in your test company or in Fabricam that you have, please feel free to go and do it, and we're going to show you how to do it. Okay, so I'm actually just going to turn my workflow off. Oops, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I left too many windows open as per usual. All right, let's turn this one off, and let's actually create a new one. All right. So from here, we actually want to select that we want to have a new workflow, because you could have multiple workflows working inside of there. And I'm actually going to say this one is going to be, if it's under $50,000, we don't need an approval. And if it's over $50,000, then we require an approval. Okay. Now, I'm just making up this number. Of course, you can pick whatever numbers are within your own threshold from your current numbers that you have here. Okay. So, of course, it wants a description because everything in GP wants a description. Okay, you'll notice here that you have some options. This is where you can allow delegation of tasks. So if you remember when I had this email pulled up, I can approve or reject. What a delegation is that if I got this request to approve it and I'm not the appropriate person to approve it, or I don't feel like doing it, or whatever the case may be, I can delegate it and say, you know what, Scott's actually going to approve it because he has enough privilege to approve it. Okay. I also have allowed the originator to be an approver. What this will allow you to do is that the user who enters the invoice allows it to approve the invoice. This will depend whether or not that can happen in your environment or not. Okay, and then always require at least one approver. I very rarely see a workflow where you don't have to have at least one approver. Okay. You also have this bottom part here when you have when a task is overdue. You can actually set due dates for how long somebody has to do what we call assignment of tasks. And the assignment of a task is to approve or reject or delegate an invoice or anything to do in that workflow. If, let's say, it goes to someone and you only want to give them 1 day's worth, if they don't do it, it goes to their manager or goes to another manager who can approve it, just so that it keeps your AP department rolling, or maybe any of your other workflows. You can actually decide if you want to have a task overdue or not. I'm actually going to leave this by itself. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and save this workflow. Okay. This workflow actually doesn't have any criteria on it right now. So if you notice here, my step box is currently empty. Okay. So we're going to create that new step there. And here is actually where you bring in those things that say, okay, if it's 50K or more, or if it's this vendor, or you'll notice all the requirements that I have inside of this. I also apparently need to learn how to spell today. All right, so we're going to say if it's 50K or greater, we require an approval. Okay. So we're going to say an action is required when the following condition is met. Okay. And this is where we set our conditions. And you'll notice here I have lots of fields to pick from for what I want it to be based on due date, PO number, payment terms ID, shipping method, you name it. There's a lot in here to go by. And you can definitely kind of pick around there. So I'm actually going to pick our document amount here, and I'm going to say when it is greater than, and you'll notice that you have quite a few options here, that it contains or begins with, kind of all those options we're used to seeing inside of GP. So I'm actually going to say is greater than and includes 50,000. Nope, that's 5 million. Sorry. Back onto the I can't type today. Maybe if someone deposited $50,000 in my bank account, I would learn how to type the number. But just putting it out there for some good karma. So you can also display the extended field list. You can see a whole range more inside of here. And of course, take a peek at them before you start your workflow, because these are the ones that definitely allow you to make that workflow basically anything you want it to be. So we're going to put the greater than and includes. There we go. I got 50,000 right off the bat here. And I'm going to add that in there. You'll notice once I hit OK, it requires that I have this here. Now, I also have to pick who this gets assigned to. Okay. Remember how I said that this workflow actually works on Active Directory and not our GP users? I'm actually not going to search for our GP user in here. I'm actually going to search for my Active Directory, which in this environment is my whole name, which is a lot to spell. Okay. So you'll notice that it's me. Okay. And I can actually say a group of users that could actually have that. You can have a dual authentication in here. So I could actually say Scott can also be an approver inside of here. I can add a third person. I can add as many as I need to. Okay. But we're going to say that Rob's out in there. I'm going to take away his privileges, and I'm going to say that it's Scott and myself who gets to approve. Okay. And you'll now notice that we've actually set a time limit of 8 hours. Okay. You'll notice here that you have a completion policy as well. This is what I was just saying, that if you wanted to have them all approve or just one must approve or majority, you could actually set this. In this case, in my setting, only one of us needs to respond saying that it needs to be completed. Okay. You'll notice that I've also set my condition to end the workflow path when it's done. You could also set that if you had a little bit more of a complicated workflow, that it can continue to the next step and go inside of there. Okay, so now that my step is created, let's go ahead and save that step inside of there. So now you'll kind of see my branches here. I have a 50K approval. There's my step where it says if it's greater, my document amount is greater than $50,000, I require one of these two managers to approve it. Oops. I do want to save it. Let's just open this up here. Now, in order to turn this active, we actually have to turn a manager on for this. Okay. And inside of here, you'll notice that my manager is Brittany, which is myself. I can also add another person in here for a manager. These are people who can override, and usually are system administrators or CFOs or somebody who can kind of, do that approval over everyone else. So typically, we would make this kind of an administrator. Okay. So now that I have a manager there, I can go ahead and hit active. And that once that this is selected as active, I've now created that workflow and it's now actually in use. Okay. So if I was to go in there, if I go over $50,000, it now requires an approval. If it's under $50,000, it doesn't require an approval. Okay. And of course, all that information is still inside of there as well. Okay. That I have it inside of there. Oops, I didn't turn it active. Sorry guys, let's go back into that window there. 50K is active and save that workflow. Helps when you actually hit save. Okay, and now you'll actually see that once I have that active, I have my submit button pulls up in here. And if it's over $50,000 now, oops, sorry. You'll notice that if I make it 60,000 and I put this in a batch. Now, when you're using workflow, you actually have to use a batch. It doesn't allow you to submit from just the window. It wants a batch to keep that all nicely tied together. Here's my $60,000. You'll notice that I have my workflow that it's pending approval by 2 approvers and it's due by tomorrow at 9:18 a.m. Okay. You'll notice here that it's assigned to the 2 users. You can also see in the workflow who the 2 users are that it's sent for. Okay. Now, all of this information is saved forever and ever, amen, because it's saved in your SQL database. It's not saved outside. So for those of you who don't actively play inside of SQL, which I wouldn't suggest, but if you do know what SQL is, if you don't, kind of picture SQL as 10,000 worksheets all saved together, kind of linked together, and that makes up all your core information inside of GP. All of your workflow information is saved inside of SQL, so it's sitting in there ready for you. You can also do things like automated SSRS reports if you're currently using those in your environment, to have them automatically email it to people, or to even see how often somebody approves. Because this information is all saved inside of there, you can do SSRS reports, smart list reports. There are some out-of-the-box workflow reports as well that are inside of there. And you can see that information for as long as you want to, okay? Because it is saved forever and ever, amen, in your system, okay? Now that we saw how easy it is to make a one-step workflow, you might say, you know what, that was too easy, Brittany. How do I make a 2-step workflow? It is simple as coming back into your workflow maintenance window, which if you remember, it's a little bit of a scroll. I can actually just add another step in here. You'll notice that I have this new step button. You can say, you know what? Oh, hold on a second here. There we go. Let's hit a new step in here. Oh, we have to make it unactive because it doesn't want to be working while I have it going. Yes. All right, so let's put in our new step in here. We can just add that new step in here and we can say, you know what, if it's over $100,000, I need a different set of users to approve it. So let's go find that document amount. Okay, when it is greater than $100,000. Okay, that we actually require the assignment to go to Terry and Bob. Okay, so now we can have it where they have 8 hours to complete it. Now you can actually adjust this time limit. You can give them 4 hours, 3 hours, whatever the case may be. Now you might say to me, that's great, you gave me 8 hours for a user to do that, but what happens if you have a holiday or a stat holiday, or we only work Monday to Thursday because we're moving to a 4-day work week? There is a calendar set up inside your workflow as well. Okay, so if you'll kind of notice down here underneath my workflow maintenance, I have that workflow calendar where I actually say, okay, we actually work Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. Okay, maybe we work Sundays and Saturdays. And we can also say our no work days. So these are more like our stat holidays where we would put in, you know, Victoria Day or Memorial Day if you're celebrating in the U.S. You know, all those stat holidays that you might have. So you can have it where, let's say I send it out for approval at 4:55 on a Friday. We don't want this 8 hours to count until 8 o'clock Monday morning, right? Because you can't give them 8 hours on a Saturday to complete it. Or maybe you can. Some people will diligently check their emails throughout the weekend. Some people do not. It's completely up to you guys if you want to run that company calendar or not. It is in here for you to have your workflow calendar. Okay. It will default from 8 to 5 Monday to Friday. I guess that's what Microsoft's hours are. Okay. Now, the second part, if you guys remember when I actually did the workflow earlier and demonstrated, you saw this email come up. You can edit this email as well to give it a little bit more information or less information, or to really just design it the way you would like. Okay. So you'll notice you actually have this email message set up inside your workflow, and it requires you to log in. Also requires me to put in the correct password. Sorry. There we go. So we can actually pull up those approvals inside of there. So these are the emails that can go out for our payables transaction. So you'll notice here that it's a little bit of your text, and then you have your lines that you're filling in here for the step, what your deadline is, and this is the information that I've decided to put in here: the document type, document number, description, vendor, document date, transaction amount. This might be too little or too much. It's up to you. You can actually insert some fields inside of here. Okay, you'll notice that you have all kinds of information inside of here, like payment terms, trade discount, vendor ID, address codes, remitting, all sorts of information. You also have your workflow fields as well. So these are things like the originator comments. So if you remember when I was actually submitting that invoice in and I said, please pay now, it's urgent, you can have that workflow field pull inside of here as well to your originator comment. Okay. You can also have the workflow originator, which is the person who actually submitted it for approval, okay, and status. Now, you can put in there as much or as little as you like, okay. One of the nice things as well with this message setup, if you're actually using the document attach feature inside of your transaction entry window, you're using the document attach, you can actually have those documents attach it and be embedded inside of that email that comes back to you as well. Okay, you can have that, you can say that you want that inside of your email as well, so those who are maybe approving outside of GP can see those documents you do attach. Maybe that is some additional information, or maybe that's a PDF of the invoice. Inside of document attach, we can pretty much attach almost anything. We can attach JPEGs or PDFs, Word documents, Excel, pretty much anything that is not a moving file. There's not too many file types that I come across that it does not accept. So of course you can have that doc attachment. Now you might say to me, you know what, I'm really interested in that document attachment setup, or document attachment. I'm going to say it's a very easy setup. Most document attachment is core to GP, so you should actually have it, and it actually has its own setup down here. Inside the company setup, just above your workflow, you have document attachment, okay? It won't turn on until you allow the document attachment to be there. I believe we actually covered our document attachment in our training Tuesday, I think 3 weeks ago, and Scott might correct me. And I believe Scott was saying that he got most of our training Tuesdays actually posted if you do want to see more information about document attachment. And Scott can always help you out to find those recordings as well. So if you are curious on how that document attachment works, yeah, see? If you're curious to see how that document attachment works, go ahead and go see that. But I would suggest if you are going to go down that workflow path, is to take a deeper dive into document attachment, or maybe you're using document attachment as well and you just want to try out that workflow. So I know we have about 8 minutes left, and I wanted to open up the floor to anyone who has maybe some questions about workflow or maybe document attachment. So I'm going to leave it open on the floor.
Okay, let me...
Scott will help me out with this part.
Of course. Let me move towards my closing, and then we'll move it over to questions, just to be nice for the recording. I'll make myself presenter, showing screen. That was great, Brittany. Thank you so much. For those that are new to Endeavour, we're now into our 30th year working with Microsoft Dynamics, ERP, CRM, and cloud solutions. Those on the line are obviously interested in GP. We also work with Business Central and Nav, as well as the CRM products, Office 365, and all of the cloud components to surround GP with the cloud. For those who want to reach out for more information, either reply to this webinar invite or reach out to Trish, James, or Steve, and all of the team at Endeavour is happy to support you the best we can. So within GoToWebinar, there is a questions section, and I see there's a question asked. Okay. Can we get a smart list report that follows up on approvals that's available in GP? Brittany, do you want me to make you back to be presenter?
Sure.
Make presenter.
Okay. So yes, you can have it. All that information is inside a smart list. Okay. You'll actually see it underneath your additional smart lists. You'll see that you actually have inside of there. There's actually a cute tool in here. It's actually called your Smart List Designer viewing pending approval. So you can actually create your custom smart list to say what you want and how you want this to filter. Like, do you want it anything that's expired or anything that's out there? You can also use those navigation lists as well to do that. As I said, all that information for workflow is inside of your smart list, okay? You can pull it inside your smart list, and of course, like anything else in smart list, you can either use this designer or you can go straight into smart list and actually go and do your normal kind of designing where you put those columns and filters on, or you can use the Smart List Designer view pending approval. I have nothing pending approval right now. And just to let you know as well, if you're not using the web services or the email functionality, when you log into GP and you actually have the workflow, an approval pending for you, a little task reminder comes up and says like, hey, you have some tasks waiting for your approval. Are you going to do it? Now that's dependent of whether or not you have users that are actively going in and out of GP, or if your core users of GP are very stagnant inside of GP from 8 to 5 or whatever their hours may be, because they're your heavy users of GP. Okay, so yes, 100%. You can pull it in Smart List or SSRS. You can even do it in Excel if you'd like as well. If you are an avid Excel user, you can use an ODBC connection with Excel to do it as well. And you know what? I now talk so much, I forgot what the second question was. Scott, can you help me out?
No problem. Second question was, are there options for the workflow before extending the workflow from Dynamics GP? Something about prompting the originator. And then I also have a similar question, if I can just jump in. A similar question that someone asked about, can they create a workflow based on which expense account is entered, which to me sounds similar to prompting.
So yeah, I'm gonna take these in two different ones.
Okay.
So if you remember when I actually went into that workflow setup inside of here, and I was inside that step, just let me hop in there. If you remember in this step, you sorry, when I'm in here. Oh Lord, I'm in the wrong one. You allow the originator to be an approver. When you allow that to happen, you also can make prompts against that originator to say like, hey, you have a task due. So sometimes what people will do is say, okay, the originator has to have the originator's approval and a manager's approval, or one or the other. So you can start having those prompts by the originator. And you can kind of do that in a couple different ways depending what workflow you're doing. We actually did a payables transaction. You could do a payables batch. You could say, hey, you have a payables batch, and with a workflow saying, hey, you have a payables batch. It hasn't been posted in a day. Are you delegating or rejecting this task? What are you doing? Now, as for the GL codes, if you want a particular GL code to go to a particular manager, yes, you can do this. This kind of seems like you're looking for whoever is assigned that part of the budget. You're looking for them to approve or reject that amount going against their budget. So yes, you can. It's a little bit more of a complicated workflow, okay? And it depends whether or not you're going to do it on the purchase order approval, because if you remember, we have workflow completely on POP on the PO receipt, PO invoice, or PO issuance, sorry. And of course, you can do it in the payables transaction or batch approval, depending kind of how you want to do that. But yes, you can do that in a, depending how you want to do that. Now that gets a little bit more of a tricky and a complicated workflow, but to answer your question is, yes, if you're kind of looking to see which way you're looking for a budget approval. Now, just to kind of let you know as well, there's an oldie but a goodie tool inside of GP that if you're looking for an approval against the budget amount, and it doesn't have to go to a particular manager, and I think we're also covering this, I think on June 6th, and Scott may correct me on that one, is look at PO encumbrance if you are using POs. It does look at your directed budget amount per GL and allows you to do that. It's an oldie but goodie tool. Lots of people don't use it, but mostly because it's hidden inside of GP, but it's a great tool. So if you find workflow doesn't quite work for you, what you want to do is I would actually take a very good pros and cons list of both PO encumbrance and workflow. And we are covering PO encumbrance with our controls management, which I think
Tuesday,
is
June the 9th.
June 9th. See, this is, Scott keeps me on track.
Yep. So we just sent out the invite this morning, actually. So some of those on the line, if you haven't read your email yet, we announced that Tuesday, June 9th is going to be a variety of GP controls as government restrictions start to loosen and additional operations and businesses start returning to businesses in different fashions, obviously unique for everyone on the phone. But yeah, Tuesday, June the 9th, we're going to be covering off encumbrances, budgets, a few other things around due dates, AP and AR considerations.
Yes.
Okay. Approvals for receiving, can an approver see the PO information? What do they see in document attached? Does it all come through the email? And finally, can they get the GL coding?
Okay, so there's a lot of questions in there, and I'm going to try and answer as much of them as possible. So You can put a workflow on one of the top steps or all three. So you can put a workflow on the PO issuance, the PO receipt, or the invoice match step of the PO. So yes, 100% you can put it on approval based on the PO receiving. You can also use the email functionality of it where you do have that inside the PO requisition as long as you have web services installed, okay? So web services allows the approve, rejection, and delegation if you're doing that inside of there. To answer the third part of that, yes, if you're attaching anything in your document, attach in the PO receiving inside this window and you do any attachment here, you can have those attachments put in there as well. You can also have things like the edit list attached to that as well if you're looking to do that. Now, when you're talking about the GL code, I'm assuming you're talking about the line item. I'm going to assume. That one gets a little bit more tricky. We have some ways around that one, but if you'd like to go further down kind of that investigation, I'm happy to help you out with that one. It's a little tricky because you're going line by line, and it can make it, you know, if you're receiving 50 items, it can get very long and a little cumbersome for somebody to approve. But feel free to reach out if you want to go any further down that line. Again, if you're looking to go against the budget per GL, I highly suggest you to look at PO encumbrance as well as workflow and see which one will work out better for you. Maybe use a combination of both. It's not a one or the other situation. Okay, as long as you have a budget installed inside of GP, PO encumbrance is great. But yeah, feel free to reach out if that one gets a little bit more tricky, because that's not a basic workflow. You're getting into a little bit more detail there. But for sure, you can get around with stuff like that. Okay.
And we also have third-party tools. They obviously get a little more costly, but get into the whole invoice processing, PO, scanning and stuff like that in more complex workflows that we use a whole portal.
Yes, that is also true. There's also a variety of third parties out there as well.
Yep. Next question, I hinted at it previously, but I don't think we answered it. Can they create the workflow based on which expense account or which department is entered? So some departments would have workflow and some wouldn't.
Yes. Okay, so workflow is a little bit of a blank slate. You can hinge which manager or which ones require approval based on your rules. If you remember, when I highly suggest you to go take a peek at the workflow maintenance window and see what fields you have available to you to pivot on. Okay. And that would also depend to whether you're doing that from a POP invoice or doing it from a payables transaction. But yes, you can have multiple rules set in there. You can say, you know, if it's going coded to the finance department, that they don't have to approve their stuff, but if it's going to marketing, they have to approve, so on and so on. So yes, 100% you can do that. It just depends how you're going to do that and where you're doing that. So we actually built a simple one today just to let you test it out. But I love that you guys want to go deeper down. And that would depend whether or not you're using the purchase order to do that or the payables transactions. But go ahead and check out inside the rules what fields you actually have available to you. And you can pivot off any of those fields or combination of those fields. You could say, you know, the account plus who the vendor is or plus who the department is, whatever the case may be, pivot it based on those. You just have to build those rules accordingly. And that's where I say workflow is more so about getting all those rules out of somebody's head and into rules because you do have to actually tell the system each individual rule that happens in there. And we all know those rules are in somebody's head and they're probably very good at them. You just have to get them out of their head. Okay, so yes, 100% you can take a peek at what the fields are and whether or not you're doing that side of the payables transaction or you're doing that inside of purchase orders.
So everyone, that's your homework from today's training session is map out your workflow processes and all of the exceptions to the rule and what-if statements and contingencies, and if someone's away, who is the backup assigner, because the system can capture and automate all of that and have the reminders and the alerts and the triggers, but we have to be able to document those appropriately and put in the system. And then the Endeavour team can either do that for you or be a coach and a mentor through support to support you through your own workflow processes. Last one, Brittany, is there workflows to approve EFT payments to vendors?
Okay, so that's a little bit of a loaded question. So you actually have Payables batch approval. So we don't have individual EFT approval. We can actually do a Payables batch approval because, as we all know, we have to put our EFTs inside of a batch and be able to post that batch for it to create the EFT file. So what we can actually do is put that workflow on the Payables batch, and we would say that Payables batch is only for when the EFT is checked off so that you get a batch approval for EFTs and go from there. So it's actually approving it before it gets posted and that EFT file gets created. Now, however, if you need a little bit of a if you're going to do that, you also can have the control on the other side as well, is on the vendor approval. And you'll notice that that's actually over here, is you can also track things like anytime there a vendor's EFT information is changed, like bank transit routing inside of there as well. So you can kind of have a dual approach to approving those EFTs. But if you'd like some more information on that one, feel free to reach out. We also have some other methods to help you out with that EFT approvals as well, depending on if workflow fits all of those needs. But yes, you can. It's just in the Payables batch approval. But if you have very specific needs for EFT, feel free to give us a shout.
Fantastic. That's all the questions.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and reach out to Endeavour if you have additional questions, comments, concerns, and we're here to help you the best we can.
And of course, thanks for listening to me on another Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday. Bye now.